Hello, welcome back to the channel. My name is Kaylina and this is the Fox's Hideaway, and we're keeping things super casual today. We are in the bedroom right now, not that kind of like casual, but honestly I just did not want to sit in my other chair in the other room. Love the chair, it's like vintage and love it, but it's not always the most comfortable to sit in, and I wanted to film a video, but I'm just feeling kind of drained. I don't know why, but well, I know why. There's some planetary stuff going on right now that I think has everybody kind of just drained, emotionally, possibly physically. I thought the Virgo season would be more of my month, but so far I've just been really tired through it and honestly not super motivated, surprisingly. But I still wanted to make a video, and so we have an interesting topic today. We are going to talk about solar flares. So let's get started. Okay, so why solar flares, you might ask? Well, I was on a walk the other day, and I was like looking up at the sky, and there were so many birds just like swarming all over the place. And I was like, that's interesting. And so I posted it on Instagram, and I was like, maybe I've seen one too many movies, but it's never a good thing when birds like swarm around like that. It wasn't normal, like not a normal kind of flying. Like they seemed to be just kind of jumbled, and yeah. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so then one of my colleagues posted, and she was like, well, maybe it's a solar flare. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I've heard the terminology before, but I wasn't super well versed in it. I didn't exactly understand what that all entailed. And so today I did some deep research and made a video about it because I wanted to educate myself about it, and it's actually quite an interesting topic because there is a lot more components involved in it than I even realized, and especially in regards to like our circadian rhythm and how that plays like a major part within like solar activity. And so I'm just going to talk about this for a little bit. I've got my little thing of water right here because we're going on week 6 of still kind of just coughing up phlegm. You would think I'd fucking run out by now, but it's still coming. So that's probably part of the reason why I'm so tired. And yeah, there's just some energy going on right now. And then I don't know if you guys also noticed, but the other day there was just like this odd shift in energy. I can't even like explain it, but there was this very odd shift, and the veil is starting to thin. Like I'm just getting a lot of static. I'm getting a lot of random voices. Just sometimes I can sort of make out what they're saying, other times not so much. And I know that makes me sound like a crazy person, but it's almost like I've tuned into a radio, but the radio keeps like skipping. So like you keep getting random snippets of just randomness, and it'll be just while I'm out and about doing my thing. Like it's not even like intentional. It's not even during meditation or anything. In fact, sometimes when I do meditation, it seems like it's radio silent, but the minute I'm just cleaning or whatever, all of a sudden I'm getting things. So, and I wish they were productive things, but they're not. It's just like random words here and there. But you'll probably notice that you might start seeing a lot more spirit activity happening, because I've definitely noticed. It was this very distinct like shift. I swear, the minute it turned September 1st here in Excelsior, like the trees instantly were like, oh, it's time. And then there was just like this weird energy of this place might feel a a little bit creepy as we inch towards Halloween. And creepy for me isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I love spirit work and that kind of stuff, but it definitely was different. And at the Elms, saw like a distinct shadow, like, man during the one massage. Like, I was in a couples massage, and all of a sudden, like, I just saw this shadow like start on one side of the wall, and he just slowly made his way across, and I was just like, my eyes literally like followed him as he went. I was like, okay. And like, I have noticed that my sight is starting to get more than it used to be, because I definitely feel things the most, but we're trying to kind of activate the sight a little bit more, not too much, because I don't necessarily want to see every kind of spirit that exists all the time. Like, that might be a little bit much for me, to be honest. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. Solar flares. So the first thing that I found was the North Industrial Ecology problems in Russia. All the way back in 1948 to 1997, they conducted a study. And I put it in parentheses just because I don't know all the details of this study. I don't know how like professionally done it was. I don't know like if they had, you know, the right way to conduct a scientific study is what I'm saying. I don't know how in depth it was. But they found that geomagnetic activity had like 3 kind of main seasons. So they noticed that March to May, and then July, and then also in October, that this activity was heightened. So they also noticed that within their people, there was a lot more anxiety, there was more depression, the suicide rates like jumped up, and this was in the city of Kravosk. And so it was interesting because there was also more cases of like bipolar as well. And so something about this energy was causing people to kind of not feel the best, not act the best either. So a lot of the times, which I found in a lot of the research that I was doing, is that it connects with our circadian rhythm, which is super important because our circadian rhythm doesn't just relate to sleep. It relates to a bunch of other stuff that our body does as well, which I'll go over here in a little bit. But it affects our melatonin levels. So it drops our melatonin and then it ups our cortisol. So it affects how we sleep and how our body functions, which can become kind of a problem. So, for instance, like some of the symptoms, which I'll go over here in just a second, they're short-lived. Like, they're not long-term, but when our circadian rhythm gets thrown off, it can cause a boatload of issues, other issues. So it's kind of like this domino trickle-down effect where one thing that doesn't seem so horrible could end up causing a lot more problems down the road. But there's a woman, Kelly Posner. She's a psychiatrist at Columbia University, and she believes that the circadian rhythm has different cues from the outside environment that it reacts to. And so she thinks that the magnetic fields are definitely one of them. And obviously, we're surrounded by EMF like a lot of the time. I mean, your cell phone alone sends off EMF. The satellites, the wireless satellites, you know, there's so many things that radiate EMF. Some people seem to be more sensitive to it than others. And honestly, there's just not enough studies done about it to really confirm or deny how much it affects us. But if those magnetic fields are impacting us and it's throwing off our circadian rhythm, you'll see here in a minute that it can potentially be a pretty big deal. So some of the symptoms include like headaches, extra inflammation, flu and cold-like symptoms, palpitations, mood swings, spikes in infectious and chronic diseases, feeling just generally unwell. And then chaotic or confused thinking, also like erratic behavior. Obviously, in that one study, if the suicide rates were going up, people were not themselves. But like I said, when we are having high activity, those are short-lived. So that's good. Sorry, I've got to drink this water, otherwise I will be coughing through this whole darn video. I already started over once, so. Alright, but solar eruptions throw about 10 billion kilograms or 22 billion pounds of solar plasma into space. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine like how much that is? That is freaking insane. So, but the sun can do this. Oh my gosh, the sun can have flares about 1 to 3 times a day, but we are not necessarily going to have any kind of effect every single day. You know, there's going to be times, depending on how much energy it's throwing out, that's when we kind of have to worry about it reaching us. So these storms can also mess with satellite and power, our grid system, GPS, our phones, oil and gas drilling. So when there are like large amounts of activity, it can pretty much shut down that layer of the atmosphere where it's interacting with satellite and that kind of stuff. There's another man, Dave Gary. He has a PhD. He's a professor of physics at the New Jersey Institute. He thinks that the solar activity only messes with to a certain point, certain layer of Earth's atmosphere. Obviously, it has a magnetic field for a reason, because if it didn't, we would be like Mars and we'd all be dead. So he believes that it's not penetrating all the way down to us. He thinks it's only affecting the technology level of Earth's atmosphere. But honestly, there's just not enough studies to prove if he's correct or, otherwise. So, in my opinion, I feel like I'm one that believes in astrology, and so I feel like if the planets can affect us, kind of, I mean, why would the sun throwing a bit of a temper tantrum, so to speak, why wouldn't that affect us? The sun is our vitality, it's our life force. So when it's throwing off big bouts of energy, yeah, I bet we can feel that. We're all energy. Everything is energy, and it interacts with us in different ways. So in that aspect, I 100% feel like solar flares could definitely impact us. Physically, yeah, I think it could too. I don't think there's enough research done about it as of yet to really confirm nor deny. But I just feel like as a whole, there's just so much we don't know. We're constantly evolving. Science is constantly being proven wrong about even the oldest things that we thought were concrete. So, yeah, I think it's definitely possible. And I definitely feel like some people are more sensitive to EMF, which would explain why maybe we're seeing kind of a rise in all these chronic sicknesses and these nervous system disorders. Like, there's got to be something that is playing into that, and so it could highly be possible that this is playing into it. You don't know, But when the ultraviolet rays do reach Earth, they create geomagnetic storms in Earth's atmosphere that can last for days. So, and funny enough, I looked it up, and we are in kind of a higher solar activity phase right now. So I think through like the 17th, I think it was, somewhere in there, we're going to be having some higher activity going on. So NASA themselves don't think that it affects us on the ground level. They think it just affects us in that certain atmospheric level of Earth's magnetic field. So there's a certain scientist called a heliobiologist, and they are somebody who literally studies the health effects of solar energy and solar activity. And some of their researchers do believe that it impacts us, especially in symptoms regarding like our heart. So things like blood flow alterations and cardiac arrhythmia and cardiovascular disease, epileptic seizures as well, increased blood pressure, and increased incidence of myocardial infection related to death. So it's intense stuff, and they've seen a peak in it, as well as in like strokes as well. So interesting. And then there is a yogi, while I was looking up some videos, his name is Sadhguru, and he kind of looks at it from more of like a spiritual side. And he said that anytime that there is a high amount of solar activity, we see a heightened consciousness within humans. And it can go one of two ways. If you're in a balanced state of mind, the solar activity is going to kind of increase that, and you're going to grow more spiritually. If you're unbalanced, it's going to make that even worse. So he kind of saw it from that point of view, which I could definitely agree with. You know, like I said, the sun is kind of the vitality and life force. So if we're kind of not in a good place, that's going to heighten that. And if we are in a good place, it's also going to heighten that. So just being kind of balanced within our life is always a good thing. Of course, obviously, that is easier said than done. I totally understand that. Like I said, keep in mind that we're around EMFs all the time. They're radiating off of different levels. Even just using the microwave, you know, like carrying around your phone all the time. And I do think it would be kind of, I don't know, a wee bit ignorant to say that the EMFs don't bother people, because I feel like as a whole, as time has gone by, society just seems like it's having a very hard time resting and getting good ample sleep. And I feel like sometimes we just feel like zombies trying to get through our day. And I feel like it's just gotten worse over time. But that could just be me. But then COVID-19, so interesting thing about COVID-19, it happened during like a minimum solar activity time. So it showed that it can happen in minimum and high activity where these diseases are like coming about, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, if it was just kind of on a balanced level, not so much a problem. So that's something that's kind of fascinating. But it affects our immune system too. So other factors that can contribute into this are things like latitude, humidity, temperature, atmospheric pressure, high altitude may be linked to higher sensitivity to EMF, but these are also the people that might have better coping mechanisms for it too, which makes sense. Which could also be why my mom has a terrible time in high altitude. Absolute terrible time. Now, granted, that can be for a lot of other reasons as well, but she's also, I feel like, a very sensitive person, so that could be playing into it too. You never know. So to follow up with the yogi's perspective as well, there's another site that was talking about a bunch of studies that had been done, and they talked about the same kind of thing, where people would have two different effects. They would either, if they're more in a parasympathetic mindset, then they wouldn't it wouldn't affect them quite as bad. But if they were in a sympathetic state of mind, where that stress is building and it's kind of the fight or flight mode, that they tended to have more disease that happened from it, because it was throwing off their body's equilibrium. So keep in mind, circadian rhythm also influences other critical functions within the body. So it affects our hormones, which, as a woman enough, our hormones are already, I feel like, out of control half the time. So when I saw that, I was like, oh shit. As if I need any more help being a crazy person. But metabolic stuff, as well as cardiovascular, neurological stuff, and immune functions. So kind of big deal if this gets thrown off, because it can really affect us in other areas of our life. And so disturbances in the cycle has been linked to type 2 diabetes, obesity, infection, cardiovascular disease, and even cancer. So when your circadian rhythm is off for too long, not a good thing. Sorry, I'm trying not to cough. So this is another thing. I feel like I've just seen like a decrease in people's overall health throughout the years, and maybe this has been going on for a while, but I feel like there's some kind of component that we are missing. And a lot of people are talking about, like, you know, the new age of Aquarius or whatever, and a lot of other people are talking about how there's this like shift in consciousness that is coming, and that humans are going to awaken kind of to the next level. And God, I really hope so, because I feel like there could be some answers to some of these questions if we could get to that point. Because right now I feel like we're kind of in the stage where there are questions being asked, you know, like, so often I feel like the world gets stuck in kind of just the very physical, mundane, scientific realm, but we're also very spiritual creatures, and so I feel like there's this whole other component that we are missing. And so understanding how energy works even more in regards to, you know, solar activity, other planetary stuff, just how energy affects us emotionally, spiritually, and physically. If we could just awaken and get to that point, I think we would realize maybe why so many people are getting so chronically sick all the time. First of all, our food. I think that plays a huge part. There's so many chemicals and crap and shit that is put into our food. And there's so often times whenever you go to the doctor, you're either completely ignored or you're given some kind of awful pill to take. And that's not every doctor, but that seems to be the majority of the time. They just try to patch up whatever problem you're having instead of digging to the root and figuring out what caused it in the first place. And honestly, I could go on a complete rampage about all of that. But there's this whole energy side to it that I feel like we're almost there. Like, people are going to start being more open-minded to this kind of stuff, because honestly, our sick care model is failing everybody. And so it's sad that it's taken this point and getting this far before people start really opening up their minds to potential other opportunities. And I 100% feel like there is room for both sides. We're meant to have both sides, the scientific and the spiritual. And you see all these older societies, like way back in our history, where both sides worked so well together and they complemented each other so nicely. And then somewhere along the line, we lost it. We completely lost it. Not everybody did, but a lot of our culture and our society and our people did. So I'm waiting. I feel like I feel it too, you know. I feel like there is something coming. There is change coming. It's in the air, and I hope we can get to that point. You know, I really do, because I feel like there's so much we don't even understand. But yeah, let's see here. So, solar storms can reduce melatonin and it increases cortisol, like I mentioned before. And then there is some reason to believe low sun activity in the winter is the reason more sickness occurs, like the common cold. I also kind of mentioned that before. Which is also why, which I can't remember if I said this already, but like vitamin D is lower in the winter time. That's why, which means then our immune system is down as well. So I think that is all the notes that I took on this. I don't think I missed anything else. But yeah, so super interesting, very fascinating, that this could definitely play a part in our health. And so I would love for there to be more studies about this. I would love people to take the time to kind of understand this on a deeper level, so that we could actually really learn and pay attention to what this could potentially be doing to our health in the long run. And I do feel like EMF, we're gonna see effects of that at some point. We might not be seeing them right now in the short term, but I definitely feel like in the long term there's something to that. There's also a whole section which I don't understand quite as well, so I'm not gonna like go in detail about it, but like the hertz and like the sound waves of all of it as well. So like when it hits the atmosphere, it creates like lightning, which solar lightning, which I never really fully comprehended until now as well. But the hertz can also affect us as well. And so there's a whole like study done about the waves of sound and how certain levels can hurt us and then certain levels can bring us back into a parasympathetic mode, which obviously makes sense when you're doing like meditation and stuff and you listen to certain hertz. It can get you into those brainwave frequencies faster, the ones that help you relax and and help you rest. So, but I don't know enough of that to like really go in depth about that, but I also found that to be really interesting as well, because you always forget, you know, lightning is like there's a sound aspect to it. I mean, I didn't forget that, but you know, it's like a little mini science class and I relearned some things today. So anyway, but yeah, it also does affect birds, and it can have quite a detrimental effect on birds. It can cause them to be very confused because they use the magnetic field to direct themselves. So when that is off, they become confused. And so it can actually cause some of them not to like migrate correctly. And it can even cause some of them to like die out because they can't travel to where they need to get to. So really, really interesting stuff. But anyway, I'm going to end the video here. Hope you learned something new today. As always, be kind, stay curious, always speak your truth, and I will see you next time for another video. Bye.